Welcome once again to Breakfast Central. Kenya's President William Ruto on Monday, September 26, 2022, announced a 22-member cabinet 2 weeks after taking office, promising to deliver to the Kenya Kwanza administration that projected itself as a champion for the majority poor. Ruto, during the announcement, introduced a new prime cabinet secretary position to be held by Musalia Mudavadi, as he pledged in his campaign trail. But after about 100 days in office, some cabinet secretaries have been in one crisis or the other. Others are struggling to fit into the job, while some have hit the ground running.
To this regard, President William Ruto has now set a June deadline for every ministry to achieve set deliverables, putting some in the cabinet for the first time under pressure. Let's now bring in Herman Bunde. He's a lecturer at Kisii University School of Law and an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. Before we talk about the possibility of them meeting the deadline set for June by the president, let's talk about their assessment so far. The cabinet secretaries, as they are called, they were appointed last year. Now, while some have hit the ground running, others have not, or maybe performed below expectations. So from your perspective, give us an assessment of the ministers so far, looking at how far they've come 100 days after.
It is true that the cabinet secretaries haven't performed as per the expectation of the Kenyan. The reason why they haven't performed, one, the ministry or the cabinet secretary becomes complete if he has a principal secretary. This is someone who is in charge of the finance and the day-to-day running of every ministry. So when the principal secretaries were appointed, members, some of the Kenyan citizens moved to court to stop their swearing in, and that delayed the process of the cabinet secretary picking and dealing with the issues as required. So the ministry can only be complete if we have a principal secretary, and that is what we have been missing. And they were just appointed recently, less than 100 days ago. They were approved this year. So that is why there has been low expectation, because we didn't have a full cabinet.
Now let's talk about the choices made initially by William Ruto. Would you say that he put round pegs in round holes, or round pegs in square holes? Bearing in mind that some of the persons that he even appointed have seemingly questionable characters. Some of these appointments were from the Uhuru Kenyatta government. Some of them were William Ruto supporters. Some of them were former persons vying for elections that lost the elections. But nobody really can point out to any of these persons and say, okay, this person was, it's properly trained and experienced in this field. But William Ruto went ahead to appoint them in those positions. So do the Kenyan people feel like these persons are round pegs and round holes?
The views of Kenyans is that the appointment wasn't good. Most of the cabinet secretaries were loyalists to the current president, that is William Samoei Ruto. And I can say over 90% were election losers. And they were rewarded for having stood strongly with the current president, William Ruto. To some extent, if you take a critical analysis of the current cabinet secretaries and the former cabinet secretaries, the current one are purely politicians. And I know even back in Nigeria, what politicians can do. They can promise heaven, but there's no day you will even land in the clouds. But in the former government, we have technocrats who are willing to deliver, and they understand and they understood the ministries. So people are worried because 90% of the cabinet secretaries are purely politicians. They'll give Kenyan promises, but they will not deliver. So their appointment is questionable. People are worried if at all they will deliver as expected of them.
All right, let's talk about the assessment so far. 100 days in office. There have been arguments about the fact that maybe it's just too early to determine the efficiency of their role. Would you say that 100 days is just enough time for them to be able to prove their capacity, or do we need to maybe give them more time?
100 days is enough to gauge someone's performance. But back in Kenya, the reason why we are saying the 100 days could not be commensurate is that they didn't have principal secretaries that could manage the finance of each ministry. But if at all the cabinet secretaries and the ministries were fully composed and having the cabinet secretaries, we could be gauging them as we speak. And there are several things that have happened in Kenya since they took the office. If you come back to Kenya, they'll tell you that they even question the credibility of the national exams and how the cabinet secretary performed during the national exams. Those are issues that have been raised, and to some extent, they haven't done well. I don't know if they're planning to improve as expected of them by their boss, who is the president, by June. But to us, there is something that they can do, and they have not done within the 100 days.
Now let's talk about ministries or departments that you feel need to be given attention. It's 100 days. There's arguments that yes, might be enough to judge, but at the same time, they need to be given more time. There's also arguments about the capacity of the persons that have been appointed. But where would you suggest that William Ruto's government should really focus on if he wants to at least prove himself to the Kenyan people? Would it be in the economy, with social services, with agriculture? Because I remember that there were promises on fertilizer and improving the agricultural sector. There are conversations on improving electricity and reducing electricity tariffs and all of that. So where would you suggest that William Ruto's government should really focus on, in the time that he is in office?
Thank you so much. The William Ruto's government should focus in almost everything. Here in Kenya, things are now pathetic. The taxes have increased. The citizens are expected to pay more taxes. The level of corruption in Kenya is so high, and we need to work on it. The economy is so down. When you talk about the agriculture, despite of Ruto promising to do things in the agriculture, it is the citizens want the actual implementation. We are tired of promises. And during the campaign, the team kept on promising, but now we want things to be delivered. So William Ruto should now start giving the actual promise, fulfilling the actual promise, not giving more promises beyond what we expect. For now, people in Kenya want the things to be implemented so that they can see where the nation is moving. But as we speak, things aren't good in Kenya. And of late, the current president, has launched a complaint and a fight against the former president and their family. Such things will make William Ruto not to deliver what is expected of him by the citizen. So we expect him to sit down, let him relax, let him understand that he's the president of Kenya, and now let him fulfill the promises that he gave to his voters or the Kenyan people. With that, we'll move ahead. But if we keep on fighting over the previous government, what they did, if they didn't pay tax, that was in the previous government. But for now, we want to see what William Ruto can bring onto the table for his people.
Let's talk about the deadline that he's given them. He's given them till June to meet up with their deliverables. Of course, has now put a lot of them under pressure. I was going to ask you this at the start of the interview, but I decided to save it for last. Do you think that they will meet this deadline? How do you see this playing out in the coming days?
The deadline in June is far. Actually, as here in Kenya, we expected the Ruto's government to start delivering 100 days after election. June is even far. People are tired. They need expectation. They need the promises fulfilled as soon as today, not even June. So June is too far for fertilizers to arrive. June is too far to see a government that is fighting corruption. June is too far to see a government that is trying to lift the economy of its nation. So for me, the promise, the duration given by William Ruto in June is a bit far. The Kenyan people are tired.
All right.
But I also want to ask, if they don't deliver, is William Ruto the type of person or president who will fire them and, make further appointments, replace these persons? Because if these persons, seem to have been placed there as some sort of settlement, let me quickly share with you. William Ruto picked a lot of people, at least 16 politicians, at least some of them who lost in the recent general elections. He also picked a couple of people who you seem to be being rewarded with these positions. Some of his loyalists, some people who joined him, of course, after pulling out of Uhuru Kenyatta's government. So it seems like a lot of these things were done as political settlements. So do you think William Ruto will fire and replace these persons if they don't deliver in June?
Yeah. Back to you in studio. These are friends. These are people that are being rewarded for being good friends to the president. When it comes to firing, it is like something impossible to happen, because these are people who are close to William Ruto. For them to be fired, that is a very difficult thing. So that is why we, the people of Kenya, we are worried. If at all he could have appointed people who are neutral, people who don't support, who did not support him during the campaigns, we could be sure of holding the cabinet secretary into account by the president. But for now, these are friends. Firing them will be a tall order to the president.
That says a lot about how the country and the affairs of the citizens are seen, because at the end of the day, it's not a thing of friendship. You don't reward people, you don't reward your friends with public positions, especially if you're not sure that they'll be able to carry it out. I do hope that President William Ruto does the rightful and the needful, and that these ministers, these people will step up to the task that has been given to them. Thank you very much, Amena, for joining us this morning.